Welcome to the Sportscasters Club radio show, where it's all about becoming a better sportscaster and a better sports fan. And now, your host, a man who has trained sportscasters at Marist College, the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, and Fordham University's WFUV Radio, Rick Schultz.
Welcome back to the Sportscasters Club online radio show. I am Rick Schultz. A very special episode today. Today we talk about a broadcasting pioneer, someone who blazed a trail, and someone who set so many examples for those of us in sports talk and in media in general. Of course, I'm talking about Rush Limbaugh. So let's talk about some of Rush Limbaugh's contributions, not just to broadcasting, but specifically to sports talk. Now, for some of you, that might sound strange. You might think, well, Rush Limbaugh is a political broadcaster, a conservative talk show host. What would that possibly have to do with sports? Well, in fact, it has a lot to do with sports. And you've seen some of these things out there in the media over the past week. But I want to get a little bit deeper into three major contributions that Rush Limbaugh made to sports radio and sports talk. Some of them you've heard, some of them I'm sure you haven't, but there are three distinct things that those in the industry, they know his contributions in these areas. And those of you who are just getting into the industry, or maybe you're young in your career, you have no clue, just because you're younger and haven't been in the media industry that long, I'm going to share some of the three contributions. These three, there's probably a lot more. In fact, I'm sure there are. But I'm going to touch on three main contributions, three things that you can look at in sports talk that were directly a result of Rush Limbaugh. And I'm going to get to number one in just a minute.
If you're enjoying the show, check out our 7-hour online sports broadcasting course. We cover play-by-play, talk show hosting, television, and much more. Visit sportscastersclub.com and click on Online Sportscasting Class.
All right, so let's talk about Rush Limbaugh and his legacy in sports talk. Sounds strange, I know, but here on the Sportscasters Club online radio show, we want you to have the information that's going to make you a better broadcaster, a more informed consumer, a more informed professional. And so let's look at the three things. Number one, the biggest contribution that you've heard about a lot over the past week in terms of Rush Limbaugh is the fact that he opened up the AM airwaves. He opened it up. He resuscitated the AM airwaves. I mean, AM now, if you just were to pop into anybody's car, certainly the older demographics, AM radio is very natural. And now we certainly use our devices to access those things. But still, when you're talking about the AM dial, the AM band, there's AM and FM. And when I grew up, we would obviously tune into AM radio in the car. We would turn it on. Or in the house, we would turn it on a radio. Now, I turn on my smart device in my home. I turn on my computer. I turn on my phone. And I can use apps and different things to locate AM stations that I want to hear. So you can hear an AM sports talk show from San Francisco if you're in New York through your device. But what I'm talking about is AM radio. He completely opened it up. It was a dead medium. It was dead and dying. There were very few programming options of any real value when you're talking about the 1980s, the early 1990s on AM radio. And Rush Limbaugh became that voice, became that vocal point, and listeners flocked to him. Advertisers and sponsors flocked to him. And all of a sudden, this medium was opened up. AM radio was rebirthed. AM radio was alive again. I can remember sitting in my grandparents' kitchen table when I was 5, 10 years old, and I can remember eating my fresh pears from the farm, or my fresh peaches cut from the farm, just some great stuff growing up. And I can remember the AM radio being on on the counter in the kitchen. I can remember listening to Paul Harvey, another pioneering voice. But AM radio was rebirthed because Rush Limbaugh was successful. He pioneered it. And that directly led to the birth, growth, and expansion of sports talk radio. So that's where the link is. Without Rush Limbaugh, you don't have the growth of Mike and the Mad Dog, or of Colin Cowherd, or of Dan Patrick, ESPN Radio, and all of these other things that we take for granted now. It was all because of the rebirth and the growth of AM radio. And that was started and pushed forward and pioneered by Rush Limbaugh. So that is one of the things you've heard a lot about. And you can hear, if you watch the documentary about Mike and the Mad Dog, and you do some history and search about the history and the evolution of sports talk radio, it all started with Rush Limbaugh. It was all at that same time, and he provided that roadmap of how to be successful on AM radio, which allowed sports talk to do the same thing. Different subject matter altogether, at least it should be. But most of the time when it's done right, it is a different subject matter because people want to escape, and they look at sports as the toy department of life, the way to escape. And it only grew and flourished because Rush Limbaugh provided that impetus and provided that foundation of how to grow the medium. So sports talk radio would not be what it is today if it would be here at all on AM or elsewhere if it weren't for Rush Limbaugh. So that's his first huge contribution that as sports fans and sports media professionals, we need to understand and we need to appreciate. I will get to his second big contribution coming up next.
Are you enjoying the Sportscasters Club online radio show? If so, please hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. When we release each new show, you'll be the first to know. So hit the subscribe button in your podcast app today, and we'll keep the awesome, cool, entertaining, and informative material coming.
I am Rick Schultz. Welcome back to the Sportscasters Club online radio show. We're talking about Rush Limbaugh, and we're talking about his contributions to sports talk radio. And we talked about the first big one, the first big impact he had in sports talk radio, which was opening up the airwaves and providing that lane for sports talk to flourish and grow. Number two, if you've listened to Rush over the years, 25 plus years, 30 years, syndicated, one of the things that he does, if you listen to him, that he did so well, and this translates directly to sports talk as well, is he created that personal connection. That personal connection. When you turn on the radio, you felt he was talking just to you, one-on-one. He built a bond with his audience. He earned their trust. He had their respect. And there were a lot of things that went into doing all of those. But it all came down to the final result of a deep, intense, close, unbreakable personal connection. And when you have that as a sports talk host, it allows you to grow, to maintain your audience, to be respected, and to have a great career. So those things that he did in his format, extremely important to do in the sports talk realm. Think about it. Think about the sports talk hosts that you've listened to over the course of your life, and think if they had those qualities. Did they have that deep connection, that bond? You know, I think of people like Mike Francesa or Chris Russo, or people like Dan Patrick, or people like Colin Cowherd. And there are a lot of others, a lot of great sports talk hosts across the country now, and that have a Jim Rome. Boy, I mean, just so many in so many local markets, there are some really good ones that built that connection, that one-on-one connection. And that's one of the reasons I always liked nighttime radio. I mean, Joe Beningo on WFAN in New York, tremendous at doing that, building that one-on-one connection with his audience. Number one, it's about being authentic. It's about being one of your audience. That's one of the things Beningo did great, because he spoke their language. He talked like them. He thought like them. And that's what Rush Limbaugh did so well on the news and conservative politics side. And it's one of the things that people like Colin Cowherd and Rome and Patrick and those sports talk hosts do so well on the sports side. They relate to their audience. They connect with their audience. And we've talked a lot about that here on the Sportscasters Club online radio show and at sportscastersclub.com. But Rush Limbaugh did that so well. It was appointment radio. You wanted to tune in. And I've seen so many stories over the past week of people that tuned in and they would listen in the car. Then they would transition to a transistor radio in their pocket when they got out of their car. And then they would get into their job or wherever they were going, turn the radio on there because they didn't want to miss a minute, because it was like a friend that you visited with for 3 hours a day. And the same can be said for Mike and the Mad Dog during their heyday in the 90s, because it was appointment radio. You wanted to hear what they said about the big football game yesterday, or about the big Mets trade, or about the free agent signing, or the controversy going on in the NBA, or whatever it was. It was a one-on-one connection that you respected their opinion. You wanted to hear what they had to say. And Rush Limbaugh did that as well as any broadcaster in talk history. Just a fantastic. There's never been a better talk show host, regardless of what you think about the medium. There's never been anyone who technically could do it any better than Rush, and to make that connection and build that bond. So very important with sports talk. So that's his second biggest contribution, in my opinion, to talk radio and sports talk. And when I return, I will have number 3.
When you're done with this episode, or even if you want to open your browser now, you can go deeper and learn the secrets of sports broadcasting. Search our full list of books at sportscastersclub.com, available from Amazon and Kindle, paperback, and Audible format.
All right, so we've talked about Rush Limbaugh and the fantastic contribution that he made to talk radio over his 70 years of life, his 30 years of syndicated radio. But let's talk about the third thing. I've talked about how he opened up the airwaves and allowed sports talk and all AM radio to flourish. How he made that personal connection with an audience. And now let's talk about what I consider to be the third biggest impact he's had on talk radio, and that is building a brand. There was a really great piece at Barrett Sports Media this past week about building a brand and how Rush did that so well. Dimitri did a great job with his article. Check it out at barrettsportsmedia.com. But what Rush did was he developed a brand. You would see programs about Rush. Now, some of the things may or may not have been truthful. The portrayal of him may have not been accurate, may not have been truthful. But there was a brand that he developed as this conservative stalwart, as the doctor of democracy, as a truth teller, as a traditional conservative patriotic American. And that was his brand. So if you were a traditional conservative patriotic American, you flocked to it because he built that strong brand, that bond. Similar to Coke delivering a brand, McDonald's delivering a brand. You become to think of things when you think about that brand. And the same happens for sports teams, sports networks, sports talk show hosts. You think of that brand. When you thought of Mike Francesa, his brand has always been the thoughtful, educated, deep knowledge of a sports talk host. That was his brand. The Chris Russo brand has been a little bit more emotionally charged, a little more entertaining, a little more hot-blooded, energetic. That's his brand. When you think about a Jim Rome's brand, I would say was a little more edgy, a little more controversial. Certainly not as edgy as some of the late-night talk show hosts that you hear on Sports Talk. Some of them have gone even further to that edgy brand. But everyone has a brand. Like I mentioned Joe Beningo before, his brand in New York was the New Yorker, the New York sports fan. That's his brand. And you can see it on play-by-play as well, having a brand, play-by-play and color. In New York, you've got Walt Clyde Frazier. His brand has always been the tie back to the Knicks' golden days in the 70s, and his vocabulary and his colorful suits. That was all his brand. You know, you think of a Mike Breen doing basketball. His brand is the straight man, the factually, technically correct, smooth, even-keeled, level-headed, great guy type of brand. A fantastic brand, and that's why one of the things that's led to his great success. So as you build your brand as a broadcaster, it's very important. We've talked a lot about it at Sportscasters Club. And it's one of the things Rush demonstrated so perfectly is how to develop your brand, connect with your audience, and allow you to find and build, in his case, build his niche in news talk. Something that you can do in sports talk as well. So building a brand, the third most important thing. And those are just three of the things that quickly came to mind, the contributions that Rush Limbaugh made to sports talk radio. The fact that he opened up the AM airwaves, he showed how to develop a personal connection, and he demonstrated how to build a lasting on and off air brand that can help you succeed in the industry. So hopefully you can take those things, transition them to your portion of the industry, whether you're in sports talk, you're in play-by-play, you're a sideline reporter, you're a print journalist, whatever the case might be. But hopefully that's helpful in helping you take those lessons in building your career and having a longer lasting career and a career built on a really great foundation. So hope you found those helpful. And when I come back, I'm going to wrap this puppy up.
Is this the year you want to learn all you can about a sports broadcasting career? Visit our website, sportscastersclub.com, for articles, tips, advice, and a ton of free resources.
All right, ticking down the final minutes of the Sportscasters Club online radio show. Thank you so much for joining us here today. You can certainly find all our material at sportscastersclub.com. You can listen to this podcast, and thank you for sharing it with all of your friends who are sports fans and sports broadcasters. And also you can find us on YouTube. You can find different formats of our material there. So we're here to help you grow your career as a sports broadcaster, and it's been our pleasure doing so. Thanks for listening today. I'm Rick Schultz, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Sportscasters Club radio show at sportscastersclub.com. Don't forget to subscribe so you will never miss an episode. And thanks for liking, sharing, posting reviews, and spreading the word.